to Trump's rhetoric? You're not welcome here. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Immigrants are welcome here. Hey, hey, ho, ho.
All right, well, protesters making their presence known as the president arrived in Bethpage, Long Island, New York to talk about MS-13. Now, this has somehow morphed into an argument that he hates all immigrants, illegal immigrants. He was talking specifically about MS-13, a very, very violent gang that has grown exponentially across the country in all 50 states right now, including that town he was in. Fox Business Network's Connell McShane with the very latest from there. How did it go?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Neil. This gang has really absolutely just wreaked havoc on Long Island for the last few years, really. Going back to the beginning of 2016, they've been blamed for like 25 murders just on the island. That's about a quarter of all the murders that have been committed. And as you know, it's become a big immigration issue, and we saw that today. These gang members mostly gravitate to areas where there's a Salvadoran community. There's a number of towns here on Long Island that fit the bill in that regard. And at the event today, the Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen was talking about it, said that what happens in many cases, you get these young teenagers smuggled into the country, and then after that, the smugglers have to be paid a debt, and oftentimes that'll lead to some of the more brutal murders that you can possibly imagine, carried out by MS-13 members with machetes and on other weapons. So President Trump was talking about all of that at the event, and while he was doing so, he repeated a term that he's used to describe these members a number of times over the last week. Here he is.
I called them animals the other day, and I was met with rebuke. They said, they're people. They're not people. These are animals.
Well, you know, it's outside the event where I am right now that a group of protesters, you mentioned earlier, gathered earlier in the day, mostly local immigrant rights groups. And while they say they do agree with the president that MS-13 is a huge problem, they disagree, they tell us, with his approach, especially when it comes to the language that's used. Take a listen.
We're here to defend, I think, everyone's humanity. We think that the language that this president and our congressmember here on the island, Peter King, is using is unacceptable. It doesn't lead to solutions, and it's actually causing more division in the community.
Now, on the point of solutions, some were actually discussed at the event this afternoon. For example, it was brought up a number of times that some of the loopholes, as the president sees it in current immigration law, need to be closed. Catch and release, he mentioned, Neil, as one example of that, where criminals can be caught, then let loose, and in many cases they fail to show up for court appearances down the line. Neil?
These are nasty guys. Connell, thank you very, very much. What do you do about them? If they're in all 50 states right now, keep in mind, a little more than 10 years ago, they were largely located in California and southern Arizona. Now what? Former D.C. Police Detective Ted Williams on all of this. What do we do right now, Ted?
You know, Neil, that's the $64,000 question. I think what our viewers need to know, and I taught, by the way, organized crime at American University here in Washington, D.C., and I can tell you that MS-13 is one of the premier, most dangerous gangs in this country. They're in the money laundering, prostitution, drugs, intimidation, etc. When you ask, what do we do about them? Well, first of all, I think the president needs to form a task force of law enforcement officers all over the country who specialize in the area of MS-13 gangs. Also, I think he should try to allocate money, perhaps from Congress, to give local law enforcement the tools and the power they need to have specialized units in dealing with MS-13 specifically and especially.
You know, the one thing, I know it's been a week or so, Ted, since we heard the animals comment and everyone saying that the president was talking, about illegals, even in the wider term immigrants, when it was quite clear he was talking about these guys who are not the very nice guys. But hence all the protest out today on this, and that he's going to use this as an excuse to go after illegals, period. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, I think that Trump should not be the face of trying to eradicate MS-13 gangs. And my rationale for saying that is just what we are seeing out there. Trump is inside holding a session with people talking about MS-13 gangs, calling them animals, and you have law-abiding citizens outside, and what they're doing is protesting Trump and his immigration policies. So what is happening is that these individuals, these law-abiding citizens, are being driven closer to MS-13 than they should be under the circumstances.
You know what's weird too, Ted? I found out that a lot of these more violent sects of these groups, including MS-13, get violent once they're here. And so wouldn't that be very, very tough to track coming either over the border or going through, you know, a real aggressive screening of people wanting to come to this country? Because many have gotten here through the normal, regular means, and others, the vast majority, of course, not. But what do you do?
Well, you know, in part you're right, but I think that what happened is once these young people get into this country, they are looking for some acceptance, and MS-13 is willing to accept them into the gang culture. Right. And so as a result of that, that's one of the reasons why we're having such a problem trying to put these guys away, put them in jail. It's very difficult, and it's not easy, Neil.
You know, when it hits things, you reminded me of in the past many times, it's one thing when you're in high crime areas and you hear these things. It's quite another and a startling development, for example, when you go to communities like Bethpage and you realize, wait a minute, this is happening in an area that used to not have crime, used to not have these kind of problems. And that's what's happening across the country.
And you're absolutely right. And without being redundant, what is happening is MS-13 is giving these young people the food that the local citizens used to give them and helping them to, should we say, come into the American society. So in plain words, if MS-13 can give them $100 and a citizen can only give them $5, who do you think they're going to go toward?
No, you hit the nail on the head. Ted Williams, thank you, former D.C. police detective. Very good read of this stuff. But as he pointed out, and he was years ahead of the fact, they are everywhere, and they are some pretty bad folks. So I think sometimes when we blur the lines and we talk about illegals and legals and we sort of, you know, morph them into one area and then sort of make a blanket statement on that. That's not what's going on here. Whether you support the president or don't support the president, like the president, don't like the president, that's what makes getting progress on this very, very difficult, because it becomes a separate sideshow and nothing have to do with the show at all. The show there is about people who are killing people in communities where that sort of stuff once never happened. Fair and balanced. I thought we'd get that across. Maybe others will try the same. The 5 is now.
Area hit hard by the murderous MS-13 gang.
We're here today to discuss the menace of MS-13. It's a menace. They exploited the loopholes in our laws to enter the country as unaccompanied alien minors. They look so innocent. They're not innocent. Crippling loopholes in our laws have enabled MS-13 gang members and other criminals to infiltrate our communities. And Democrats in Congress refuse to close these loopholes, including the disgraceful practice known as catch and release.
The president also calling out Democrats who he says came to the defense of MS-13 gang members after he called them animals.
I noticed recently where Democrats, Nancy Pelosi as an example, are trying to defend MS-13 gang members. I called them animals the other day, and I was met with rebuke. They said, they're people. They're not people. These are animals. And we have to be very, very tough.
Meanwhile, a local police commissioner sounding the alarm on just how dangerous these gangs are to communities.
We need help. when we have 40% of our homicides, and we had record low homicides last year, 40% are MS-13 related, and out of those 6 that they committed, 4 of them were butchered with machetes and buried into graves, shallow graves that the families can't not only identify but can't find. We need that support from the president. We have him watching our back now. He's supporting our enforcement efforts, but we can also use some funding now from D.C.
Okay, so the president tackling this issue head on, Greg, and doubling down. He faced criticism. He said he faced rebuke for calling and identifying specifically gang members from MS-13, calling them animals. He repeated that today and then had some evidence to back it up from the local authorities.
Well, politically, this is a big win for him. In this issue, Trump's stance will register. For Trump, the MS and MS-13 stands for must stop. For the Democrats, MS and MS-13 stands for misunderstood. And the more he shows the contrast, the better it is, because the media and the Democrats, they continually with Trump, they get bogged down in language and they always lose. They're so worried about the words, and it reveals the lopsided priorities. So you got a president who's worried about jobs, terror, North Korea, gangs. Meanwhile, you have another side that's concerned that he called gang members animals. It's like, imagine your house being on fire and your neighbors are complaining that the fire engines are too loud. That's what this is. Democrats worrying about what you call gang members, our neighbors saying, hey, could your fire engines keep it down while the house burns? It's exactly that.
Can you imagine? Okay, so the 3 alarm has been sent here on Dana for MS-13. Obviously, something needs to be done about it. I saw you reacting to the statistics in terms of the number of homicides.
40%.
Absolutely, and the heinous nature of the crimes that they commit.
Well, I talked to a former prosecutor today who did a lot of these cases, especially in Maryland, who said that he thinks of MS-13 as the mafia of our generation, and that one of the ways that they've gone after them is like they used to do for the mob through RICO, which is racketeering something and something. I can't remember the exact words, but so I asked, well, then what laws, as the president said today, like we need Congress to do something, what do you think Congress could do that could actually help law enforcement? And he said that he does believe that the lax borders is a huge problem because of the ability to regenerate, and that they're recruiting at younger and younger ages, and that this brutality, he said it's almost ISIS-like in the killing, in the way, and it's ratcheting up and it's getting worse. He also said that MS-13 was in about 10 states in 2005, and by the late 2000s in all 50 states. The one thing I think today was important to bring attention to it. I did note that in Connell McShane, when he was doing the reporting for us today, that there is a local Democratic congressman who was not invited to today's meeting, and I think that was a mistake. I think because he said he would have gone if he had been invited, and why not try to co-opt some of them, Democrats, so that you can actually make this a bipartisan issue and leave the people who want to call it, who want to make fun of the president for saying animals, like they'll just have to deal with their own politics on that side. But if you really want to solve the problem, you will need Democrats, and the local congressman is probably a good place to start.
That's a really good point in terms of a takeaway of a good event today. Can be even better if you do something like that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the sheer numbers, great point, Dana. 2,000 members of MS-13 on Long Island alone. And the backdrop behind the president said, secure our borders, protect our communities. And one of the participants said, you can't protect our communities until you secure our borders. And the president has that wide view. They do regenerate. And the contrast you see between the folks yelling about the animals comment is, the president wants the rule of law, enforcing the laws we have versus lawlessness. He wants borders versus open borders. He believes merit-based immigration is better than the Russian roulette, not to use Russia, but the Russian roulette of who knows who's coming, why they're coming, what their intentions are. And Greg, to your point, MS-13 is the perfect example. This president identifies opportunities to expose the left and the insanity that they pursue, catch and release sanctuary cities. And MS-13 is that example, and everyone knows it. And it's a real problem for real people in their lives. And I think he's hit the nail on the head on this one.
Yes, and so it's really an unfortunate position the left finds themselves in, Richard, that they're defending these kind of criminals.
Defend all of them, Richard.
Lawless criminals, that now the proliferation is spread to all 50 states. When you liken them to ISIS, it seems like perfectly appropriate because they are domestic terrorists in terms of the crime, the racketeering, the murders that they carry out.
So listen, here's my take on this. So when when President Trump made the animals comment, he complained that he was taken out of context, and he was. And what he's doing to Nancy Pelosi now is taking her out of context completely. Nancy Pelosi's argument was a larger narrative about what the president's rhetoric on immigration overall and how this animal comments bleeds into that larger narrative. It was nothing to do with MS-13. If you ask any Democrat on Capitol Hill, they would say, yes, MS-13 is heinous, they're awful, and that's why we have laws like RICO and other laws to make sure that gangs like that in this country don't spread. But you have to separate MS-13 from those individuals from the dreamers. You have to separate MS-13 from the... Wait a minute, let me finish. No, she did not. Let me finish. But think about the mother who left Guatemala or Nicaragua or El Salvador, the three most dangerous countries on earth, when they walk 3,000 miles with all their belongings and their children to seek freedom and to seek the American dream. They are nowhere near what MS-13 is.
That's what he wasn't referring to that.
But that's my point. When you cannot conflate, you have to separate the two.
She purposely conflates. She says
did not
when Trump says MS-13 are animals, he's calling all immigrants animals.
No. That is not what Leader Pelosi said. Leader Pelosi,
because they believe Trump is racist, and so they want to make people think that he's racist. Right?
Listen, you just twisted a whole bunch of things to create alternative facts. Here's what Nancy what Nancy Pelosi was trying to say was the president's rhetoric overall when he came down the Golden Staircase and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. Right? The rhetoric leads to the problem, not what he said about MS-13.
All right, let me respond to that. The argument that you're using is that it really doesn't matter what Trump said now, it's what he said then.
Yes.
Which was 4 years ago.
Yeah, and also one could argue what he meant back then is exactly what he meant now, but he did it in a sloppy way. But the fact is, this argument cannot work. You know, if I didn't rob a bank, but maybe in the past I might have, so he's probably guilty. If he's not guilty now, he was probably guilty then. It's an illogical argument. Right. You can't say, and I used this analogy before, when you find a hate crime and it turns out to be false, the left says, well, it's false here, but it could be true somewhere else. It's actually a deflection from actually just admitting Trump was right, and people like Pelosi are conflated.
By the way, if you care about public safety and you care about citizens in the communities being able to go to work, to take their kids to school, why would you take the side of people who are coming in, committing heinous crimes, murders,
Nobody's
and
taking
making
the side of MS-13.
Well, but
why are you in MS-13?
I am not. I don't even know MS-13. I've never even seen them. But my point.
I have. This is the thing.
No, I get that.
Why are you denying this?
We can all agree at this table that he is taking Nancy Pelosi out of context. Can we agree on that point?
I don't think so. No.
She did not say that.
She took him out of context, and then he responded
by taking her out of context.
I think that the left has played this incorrectly from a strategic standpoint. Mm-hmm. This is a community that you would think would actually like it if the Democrats said, we understand that you're not like them.
They're preying.
But we are going to protect you by going after them. Like, I think that the strategy on all this doesn't make any sense.
Just admit one time the president might be right. Same thing
First of all, I will admit when the president's right, I will give the president kudos for being right. But here, my argument is he is conflating regular immigrants who are coming here trying to seek the American dream.
Nancy Pelosi is doing that.
We're going to agree to disagree on that because a little bit heated there, but a little bit heated over here. Watch this heated exchange between the head of ICE and Democratic California Congresswoman Nanette Barragán for suggesting his organization was anti-immigrant.
We love to paint immigrants as criminals. That is not the complete facts. It makes me sick to my stomach to keep hearing over and over again, painting the broad stroke and the picture as though these are folks who are coming here to do harm.
First of all, no one on this panel is anti-immigrant. We're law enforcement officers who enforce the law that you all enacted. So to sit there and say that we're anti-immigrant is just wrong.
All right, Greg, so people taking offense, if you say, okay, they're not saying they're anti-immigrant. They are for upholding the laws that are on the books. How is that anti-immigrant? How is that racist to enforce the law and ensure public safety?
Again, it's an example of conflation, and it happens a lot. Like, we've been in this situation where we will talk about Islamic terrorism, and people accuse you of Islamophobia.
Thank you.
It's like, but I'm not actually talking about Islam. I'm talking about terrorists who happen to be Islamic terrorism. I didn't say Islam, and therefore people go, no, you are Islamophobic. This is the same argument. It's like, how dare you come out against gangs who happen to be of a specific minority? You don't like that minority. No, you are actually guilty of doing that. If you hear MS-13 and hear innocent immigrants, that's on you, not anybody else.
By the way, do you see one of these definitions in the dictionary of animal is an inhuman person, brutish or beast-like person? So
well, that's why that
guy, to the president.
The laws were made in 1984. Congress is missing in action. They're missing in action.
Also, it was a really nice day.
Well, they're
It was a really nice day.
but not MS-13.
Spring.
There's some good things from 1984, though.
All right, well, we won that argument. Okay, the NFL announces new rules for national anthem protests. Do they go far enough? That fascinating debate next.
The game more than that. When people like yourselves turn on television and you see those people taking the knee when they're playing our great national anthem.
That was President Trump criticizing NFL players who kneel during the national anthem. Well, the NFL adopting new rules today to deal with this controversial issue. Teams can now be fined if players decide to take a knee and don't show respect for the flag, in quotes. The league is also removing the requirement that players be on the field during the national anthem. The NFL's Players Union is saying it was not consulted about the change and could challenge it if necessary. So this is a story we covered all year. Now the NFL is gearing up for next year. And Pete, they're trying to get ahead of this. How do you think they came down?
Not perfect, but good. I mean, this is a good development. I think the president was effective. The NFL was feeling the heat. The fans will ultimately decide because the locker room will become the new kneeling. I mean, what it says is if you're on the field, you must stand, but you don't have to be on the field. And the policy says, shall stand and show respect for the flag and the anthem. So it's not just standing, it's respect for the flag and the anthem. That's what the president talks about all the time. You live in this country, you have the privilege of playing a game for millions of dollars that affords you that opportunity. Stand for the anthem. The NFL responded. Listen, their ratings took a hit. Their attendance took a hit.
And their fans didn't like it.
And their fans didn't like it. And they responded to it. And we'll see how it develops. What's going to matter is how the players react, because the only people fined are not the players. The teams are fined. So how does that dynamic happen if a bunch of players get together and say we're kneeling and my team gets fined? I mean, that's on the coaches and the owners. So it's not a perfect solution. Feels like a half measure, but it's a hat tip to our president who says patriotism matters in this country.
Well, and I guess one of the things was that you don't have to be on the field. So if you don't want to stand for the national anthem, you can hang out in the locker room.
Yes, always a fun time.
Like everybody will be thinking.
Anyway, you know what the thing is? It makes sense. This political expression is no different to me than the celebration excess that you see. That you should be penalized for unsportsmanlike conduct. And so celebration excess is unsportsmanlike. Introducing politics into a game is unsportsmanlike. It's a sport, so it's unsportsmanlike. I said this when it had to be a year and a half ago. And I said, like, imagine if our viewers turned on the 5 and instead of doing political conversation, we were throwing the ball around for an hour. How upset would they be? That's no different than turning on NFL and having somebody introduce politics into something that is supposed to be enjoyable. And finally, if you really believe politically in something, there has to be a risk. So my suggestion is that you do it within the game. You actually kneel in the field, because that incurs a cost against your team.
Second down on the safety of the
just take a knee, get the ball and take a knee and see what happens, because then that shows real guts.
All right, KG, what do you think?
Yes, it'll be a flag.
Before we get Richard in here, because he's like bursting.
Yeah, he's bursting. He's bursting. I think this was a win for the president because he really took the forefront on this issue and stepped out on it. He got a lot of criticism, but he didn't back down on it because he thought, well, you should stand. You should stand for the men and women that serve in this country, for the flag, from the pleasure and privilege that we all get to be able to do our jobs, for them to be able to get on a field, for people to root for them or root against them, and show some respect for the military that serves, because this became incredibly distracting, upsetting, because people people were all different kinds of causes, and all of a sudden saying they were changing the issue. If you want to be socially active and you're upset about police, et cetera, go out, talk to them, work with your communities, et cetera. That's what you can do. Is a better, more productive way than showboating.
Richard, listen to this. The Jets chairman, Christopher Johnson, says that he's got to, this is his take on it, that if somebody on the Jets takes a knee, that fine will be borne by the organization, by me, not the players. I never want to put restrictions on the speech of our players. Do I prefer that they stand? Of course, but I understand if they felt the need to protest. What do you think of his comment?
I agree with that. And here's the thing. I have big problems with Roger Goodell. Huge problem. I think most people at the table have problems with Roger Goodell, and I think he's got to go.
Yes. He owes me money.
But I think there's a couple of other problems with this particular rule. Number one, there were no players in this meeting when the decision was decided. The Players Association was left out of it. It was a bunch of owners who got in the room and made a decision without consulting
You
the
don't
people.
think that's fair?
I think that's totally unfair because the football is not football without the players. Period.
The players have been consulting. There's millions of dollars going to players.
Yeah, but you're not consulting.
But
you're not consulting their official representation.
But if the corporate makes a decision and we're the employees, we have to follow it. We don't get to get it. We're not in on every.
But there's a distinction
meeting.
here because the NFLPA, they have a contract with the NFL, and when you levy a fine, that contract has to be negotiated by the official representation for the players.
And the fine's not hitting the players; it's hitting the owners.
But it doesn't matter. Anytime there's a new fine, the players have to be party to that conversation. Number one.
But we don't go to any at Fox, we're not showing up.
We don't
get to go to the meetings. And they talk about us all the time, Richard.
Especially you, Greg.
Yes.
But the other problem I have, and I think this rule is very vague, the ideal of respect for the flag. So does that mean they're going to close every concession stand at the stadium? Does that mean they're going to force every fan to take a hat off? Where does
They
this
should,
end?
actually. I would
Where
love
does this end? But this is the question. This is a very vague rule. It's written very vaguely, and it's written to punish players for using their First Amendment right.
They're not
And let's be very clear. The flag is nothing without our Constitution and the First Amendment to that Constitution, the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression.
So it is about the flag. So it is about the flag. I thought it was about police brutality, but I guess it is about the flag.
No, it's about the First Amendment.
Kimberly and I can't come here and wear T-shirts that have a bad word written on them.
Oh,
That would be
Dana.
against company policy.
Racist.
Yes.
Companies
But
get
it
to
would
have
be my
policies.
First
But that
Amendment
is
right to walk
completely
around in the street with
Exactly,
it.
yes.
I agree. So
That's apples and oranges. When taking a knee before this whole controversy was a sign of reverence. Remember,
Oh, come on,
Jesus
stop,
took a knee in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Oh, my gosh. Don't
It
bring
has
Jesus.
always been. Listen,
Don't bring
taking a
Jesus
knee.
into
Pretend like they were showing any
Taking a
semblance of
knee
reverence. Are you really going to
has
go there?
always
Richard?
been a sign of reverence. They're not
What are you
putting a
talking
fist
about?
up. They're taking a knee
my
when the pledge is happening. That's all they've done.
You
to
accuse
Wait,
me
what
of
are you talking
alternative
about?
facts.
What?
That's the king of
Nobody-
alternative
How is that
facts.
alternative
No,
facts?
that's not how you kneel in
kneeling.
They should
church.
have knelt in front of a police station.
Yes.
If that's the case, why
People
kneel in
that-
front of the flag?
When the coach is talking to the players, everybody take a knee so you can hear me and hear me talking to
what?
you. It is a sign of reverence.
I actually
They can do it when
respect
they're not
that
playing
way
the
you're
game.
going with this because it's so clever.
Wow. We're gonna have to end it there, Richard. You got to end on
Jesus.
clever.
Yeah.
All right, new reaction from the president on the Russia investigation and reports of an FBI informant in his campaign. Next.
Thank you, DJ. All right, President Trump is unveiling a new nickname for the latest development in the Russia investigation. He's calling it Spygate. It's involving the FBI informant and his campaign. Well, the president is also taking aim at James Comey and James Clapper, the Jims, who are saying the FBI did nothing wrong.
The Jim.
We now call it Spygate. You're calling it Spygate. A lot of bad things have happened. When they look at the documents, I think people are going to see a lot of bad things happen. I hope it's not so. I mean, if you look at Clapper, he sort of admitted that they had spies in the campaign yesterday, inadvertently. But I hope it's not true, but it looks like it is. I think James Comey's got a lot of problems. If you look at what he did, if you look at all of the lies, the tremendous lies, if you look at all that's going on, I think James Comey's got a lot of problems.
The president's comments come ahead of tomorrow's meeting between GOP Chairman Devin Nunes, Trey Gowdy, and top DOJ, FBI, and intelligence officials. Richard, I'm going to come to you first. You deserve first word here. So James Clapper, literally, these words came out of his mouth.
The Jims.
The Jims. They were spying. Okay, that was said as part of the quote. He said, and James Comey, he says, well, no, it's not spying. Let me give you the technical term. It's called confidential human sources. So because he knows the technical term and Trump uses spying, somehow he's more sophisticated and it was all meant for his good. James Clapper admitted the same same thing. He spied, but it was good for him. At what point is there an acknowledgement from the left that there was legitimate political espionage going on against a candidate running for president?
So I have a question for you.
Oh, please.
What you want from the FBI and the Department of Justice is accountability and transparency, right?
Oh, someday, yes.
So that's the same thing that Black Lives Matter and all those other groups have been asking for from police departments all across the country. We want accountability. But it's the same. No, but it is the same thing. It is absolutely the same thing. Law enforcement being accountable
got body cams
to
and all that.
people.
We're not talking about Black Lives Matter. We're talking about the president being spied on.
The president is asking for the same thing that activists all across this country have been asking for.
We're not talking about that. We're talking
so should the FBI be wearing body cams? Is that what you want to go?
Maybe we'll know if they were spying on the president or not.
Or what if the informants were wearing a wire? We don't know if these.
That's beyond the point. The other point is that there's no facts here, right? That's number one. Number two, all the informants were. This all happened after the formal FBI investigation was triggered, and according to the Nunes memo that he released, that FBI investigation was triggered by George Papadopoulos being drunk in London.
Well,
that's the last line of the memo. And after the Australians called our intelligence agency and said, hey, listen, you have a Trump associate over here saying he's got all this information, the FBI started to investigate it. And part of investigating is figuring out what are the Russians doing, how they're engaging in our elections. So that's exactly what happened.
Kimberly, yet they never told the campaign.
Right. It's so disingenuous. Now because they got caught with the hand in the cookie jar, now they're like, oh, wait, it wasn't me. We were just trying to do this to help you out because we didn't want you to eat all those cookies. So we just dipped into the jar. It makes no sense. Because the bottom line is they knew what they were doing and they were engaged in an active, ongoing, politically motivated spying operation against a political candidate. There's no other way to slice it. And the Inspector General over the next few months is going to be releasing a series of IG reports that can be incredibly devastating and damning to the CIA, to the DOJ, to the FBI. So that's where your transparency is going to come through and that's why you see New York Times and some of the other mainstream media enablers trying to get out ahead of the story to preempt because they know the thunder is coming.
Yeah, Dana, the president tweeted earlier today, it's clear that quoting Judge Andrew Napolitano, it's clear that they had eyes and ears all over the Trump campaign. So you could sweat the details, how many informants, this or that, but they were clearly focused on getting to know what Trump was doing.
And I'm totally willing to believe that all of that happened, but I do go back to when the president, we just heard in the clip, he said, I hope it's not true, but it looks like it is. So maybe they'll get some more information tomorrow at this briefing. The weird thing was it was only for Republicans, and I do think that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer were right to say there is the Gang of Eight, which is the ability to remember that was where the enhanced interrogation techniques were briefed. It never leaked. Nobody ever complained about it. It's a pretty safe operation to be able to put forward this information. I asked Trey Gowdy today on the 2 o'clock show if he would be willing to have them come. He said he wasn't in charge of the invite list, and if they could come and not leak, that would be great.
That was a good interview.
I love how James Comey was asked about this, I don't know where, and he said, how will Republicans explain this to their grandchildren? And I figure it's easy. You say this, President Barron Trump? Well, his dad was unjustly persecuted by deep state agents who failed to see the greatness of Donald Trump. This is just a simple comparison, okay? How can the media go crazy over a meeting with a woman over the Baczynski Act and Donald Trump Jr., but then dismiss all of this other activity as a nothing caviar, i.e. Fusion GPS, the spies, the dossier funded by Hillary. So all of that is nothing. But if you repeat that simple comparison, comparing that to a meeting with a woman who tried to get in there to talk about the Baczynski Act, that reveals the bias. If you are embracing one side of this story while dismissing the other side, betrays a certain measure of hackiness. So I think we can all agree at this point to bury the hatchet on this Russian mess and focus on how it can't happen in the future. Right. We all agree. We don't want the Russians to be interfering. We don't want anybody interfering with our elections. Right. So let's just
pass some laws and strengthen our elections. And maybe if you invite Democrats to the meeting, we could work together to get something done.
But they never stop talking.
Well, sorry, Devin Nunes leaks way more than the Gang of Eight.
Chick-fil-A.
Devin Nunes is the biggest leaker that I know.
That's what the Democrats should do. Bring Chick-fil-A to a meeting, you'll be welcomed.
I'm going to have to contest Barron being the heir. Maybe it is. I think it's going to be Eric Trump. Just saying. Making that up. All right, parents sue to kick out their unemployed. They got a 30-year-old son. He lives in their basement. Greg's going to react to it. Coming up next.
On Tuesday, a New York State judge ordered a 30-year-old man to clear out of his parents' house. Michael Rotondo, he didn't pay rent or do chores. Basically, he's a tiny version of Congress. And so he was finally sued by mom and dad after he refused to leave. A self-employed businessman. The parents have yet to see any of Michael's secret source of income. Right? I'm beginning to wonder what that is. His parents' home was actually a sanctuary city, and he, a sponge approaching 31, reaped the benefits. Apparently, thinking everything should be free, he almost qualifies as a commencement speaker, or at least a Vermont senator.
Huh?
Yeah. Finally, after a pile of ignored eviction letters, the judge ruled for mom and pop, and he had to move out. But being good parents, they offered him money to find a place to stay and to fix his car, secretly hoping he might leave town. But they also gave him sound advice, including, quote, organize the things you need for work and manage an apartment. And, quote, sell the other things that have any significant value. That's pretty good. And he added this. There are jobs available even for those with a poor work history like you. So true. Get one. You have to work. Translation, get off your butt and do something with your life. So now evicted, he worried about what's best for him, which was the advice just given. He did see his parents again after the ruling and said it was pretty awkward. On the bright side, he could always move into a Starbucks.
Oh, my gosh. This is the problem. That's why I'm going Dunkin'. Dunkin' Donuts.
Yes.
They wouldn't allow any of them.
You know, Kimberly, this guy's all over the news. He's going to be on Martha McCallum tonight.
I know.
I'm very excited. I moved in with my mom when I was 23. I stayed for a year. I thought it was pretty good. Is this kid pushing it?
Yeah, I think he's pushing it because then didn't he go back to their house after the judge told him get a life, get a job, and then he's like, knock, knock, who's there? Me again. Yeah, so he's showing up to he's probably going to go find some unfortunate individual that'll take him in because he's got his 15 minutes of fame and they're like taking selfies with this guy. And then when that happens and passes over, then I don't know what he's going to do. He's probably going to move back in with his parents. But I mean, what kind of self-respect does he have? Look at these parents. They're so sweet. Look at them. They're
How are you going to get a girl?
Well, this is what I'm saying. Like, well, he got one for a second, I guess. Okay. Yeah, I mean,
You know what the solution is,
transacted for a
Richard, is you just move in and become somebody's butler. Just become a butler. And but a really bad one. A really lazy butler.
Or like a
lazy Susan.
Yeah, or like a Kato Kalin or something.
My only problem with this is that I think the word millennial in the screen behind me, because all millennials are. It is.
You feel like it's like speaking to you?
No, because listen, I moved out of I packed up and I went to college at 18, and I was like, Mom, I'm never coming back home. She's like, you can always come home, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna get a job and I'm gonna work, and that's what all my friends did, and we're all doing great, and we're all millennials, and there's tons of millennials that work at this fine organization,
millennials.
Channel, and they work and they have their own apartments, and they don't live at home with their parents, and they pay rent.
Do you want to hear from him? This was on
I gotta hear his voice.
This is on an earlier show on a network. I can't think of the name of it.
Okay, fine.
Starts with C.
Do you not want to find your own place?
No.
Why not?
I don't want to live there anymore.
You don't want to live with your parents?
I don't like living with... No.
Why don't you just move out of your parents' house, like tomorrow?
I don't have the means to do that tomorrow.
Okay.
So,
do you have a job?
No.
Then we wish we could. Please take a sip of your water. Don't you want to reconcile with them?
No.
Oh, my God.
Oh, boy.
He needs a media
I
coach.
kind of feel bad.
Yeah, do you feel bad for him? Do you think there might be...
I always feel bad for everybody.
Yeah, you do. But then he's doing the TV, and he could have moved out, so it's like, how bad should you feel?
I think that the lure of being on TV, like you think, oh, well, I'll go on TV and I'll tell my story, but you're not necessarily, not everybody can talk when they get in front of a camera. It seems like a little camera shy.
Well,
I'm sure Martha McCallum will be able to pull a little more out of him.
Hopefully he's warmed up for Martha.
He's just so bad at being a deadbeat. It's like, if you want to stay at your parents' home
How do you
forever,
do it,
you can
Pete?
probably figure
Tell Tell
out.
us, Steve, how do you be a good deadbeat?
Have a little side
Inform
job,
us.
you know.
Side job.
Make them dinner
No,
once every
do
some
the
chores.
dishes.
Do a couple chores. You don't really want to
Take
do
out
it.
the
But you're a
trash.
nerd, you do it, and they give you another year.
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
result. Instead, he's like, I will do nothing.
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
you will have to evict me.
Yes.
I mean,
That's a weird thing, having to go to court
Why
over
don't
your
they just,
family.
but why don't you
unbelievable.
just
They tried to
call
evict
the
him.
cops? That's what I would do.
And
They're
the
very
parent, I mean, how
helpful.
hard is it?
If Ronan comes home, it's going to be open arms.
Could
I
it be
called the
that
police and
because
6 came over. It was amazing.
I'm going to defend him and say that because we're living longer, 31 is the new 13?
I agree. No, that's what they think.
Whoa.
Gosh. You know,
I'm 31 and I am not 13 years old.
Well, I beg to defer. No,
Hey,
no,
listen,
anyway, no.
now
But I mean,
I'm very worried.
but no, in the sense that, you know, you're living longer, you can stay longer at home.
No, but no, it's a good point. So, like, what is the acceptable age? So let's just say it's 25. If
Yeah.
we say that kids should be on their parents' health insurance till 25, I mean, I don't say that, but the law says that. Okay, whatever.
26.
26. Yeah. So 30. Yeah, maybe you're right. If you do, age.
And I'm for close families, multi-generational families. All right, okay. They're telling me
Wow,
to shut up.
geez.
Did you hear that?
No.
That was. I could.
No, but I can feel it.
Yes, I was like getting a shock in the ear.
I heard it.
I know. Amazon users up in arms over a new policy. If you are a serial returner, you'll want to listen up.
Oh, wow.